Single billionaire dad finds a poor little girl searching for food in the trash on Christmas Eve, and moved Yuki says, "Do you want to spend Christmas with me as my daughter?" What happens next is surprising. Snowflakes fell slowly outside the window, covering the yard in a white blanket. Spencer adjusted the thermostat and glanced at the clock on the wall. Christmas Eve, 7:42 p.m. In other times, the house would have been filled with laughter, music, and the scent of freshly baked cookies. Now there was only silence. The mansion, with its wide hallways and high ceilings, seemed to swallow any attempt at joy. The lights on the Christmas tree blinked softly, reflecting off the colorful ornaments and the still untouched wrapping paper beneath the branches. Spencer had spent hours decorating everything, trying to keep a tradition alive that now felt empty. His eyes found Tessa sitting on the plush living room rug. 5 years old, with brown hair in a lopsided braid, he still hadn't gotten the hang of it, and wearing the unicorn pajamas she loved so much. She was tightly hugging a rag doll with a faded blue dress, her eyes fixed on the tree lights. That doll, Hannah had made it for herself when she was a child, to scare away the nightmares, she used to say, laughing. Spencer swallowed hard. Now the doll was the only piece of Hannah that Tessa could hug. "Tessa, honey, would you like some hot chocolate?" he asked, trying to sound cheerful. The little girl just shook her head without turning to look at him. Her little eyes, once so full of life, now looked like two empty windows to a distant place. He recognized that look. It was the same one he saw in the mirror every morning since Hannah was gone. Spencer walked to the kitchen, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. He opened the refrigerator more out of habit than hunger. On the counter, Hannah's recipe book was still there. She had planned to make a Christmas feast this year. It had only been 3 months. 3 months since the phone call from the hospital changed everything. "Accident. We did everything we could. We're so sorry." Words that still woke him up in the middle of the night, sweaty and breathless. He made a cup of chocolate anyway and returned to the living room. He placed the steaming mug on the coffee table, close enough for Tessa to reach if she wanted. "Santa Claus must be getting ready right now," he commented, trying to start a conversation. "You wrote your letter to him, remember?" Tessa looked up for the first time that night. "Mommy isn't coming back, is she?" The question hit Spencer like a punch to the gut. They had talked about this before. The concept of forever was too difficult for a 5-year-old to understand. "No, honey," he replied in a low voice, sitting down next to her on the rug. "Mommy isn't coming back, but she's always watching over us from a special place. Like heaven. Like heaven." Tessa looked back at the Christmas tree, hugging the doll even tighter against her chest. "As though she can see us right now." "Yes, she can. And she'll see Santa Claus too." Spencer felt a lump in his throat. "I bet she will." Tessa was silent for a few seconds, as if processing this information. Then she spoke in a whisper. "I asked for her to come back in my letter." Spencer closed his eyes for a moment. How could he explain to a child that some things even Santa Claus couldn't fix? "Tessa," he began, but the right words just wouldn't come. "It's okay," she said, surprising him. "My teacher said that sometimes we ask for things that can't happen." He looked at his daughter, so small and already having to deal with such big truths. He put his arm around her, and they sat in silence, watching the lights blink. Outside, the wind began to blow harder, making the snow dance in little swirls. Spencer remembered how much Hannah loved the snow. The year before, they had built 3 snowmen in the yard, one for each of them. Afterward, they came inside for hot chocolate, just like the one that was now getting cold untouched on the coffee table. "Want to open one present today?" he suggested, remembering their tradition. Hannah always let Tessa open one gift on Christmas Eve. The girl seemed to consider it for a moment, but then shook her head. "Sign tomorrow." Spencer nodded, respecting her decision. Something in her tone suggested she might still be hoping for a miracle, that maybe, if she waited until Christmas Day, her impossible wish might come true. The living room clock struck 8:30 p.m. Normally, Tessa would already be in bed by this time. "It's getting late, princess." "Time for bed. Can I stay a little longer?" she asked, her first sign of wanting something in weeks. "Just 10 more minutes," he agreed, feeling a small sense of relief at this little return of the Tessa he knew. Upstairs, Tessa's room waited with its stuffed animals arranged on the shelf, Spencer's work, trying to keep things as Hannah did. The pink curtains would filter the morning light when the sun rose, announcing Christmas. Presents would be under the tree. Breakfast would be special. He would do everything right. But nothing would fill the void that Hannah had left. Spencer looked out the window. The snow continued to fall outside, silent and steady. Some neighbors had already turned off their house lights. Others kept their Christmas decorations lit, illuminating the dark night. "Daddy," Tessa's voice brought him back. "Yes." "Would Mommy have liked our tree?" Spencer looked at the tree he had decorated alone, trying to imitate the style Hannah always used. White lights, red and gold ornaments, the star on top slightly crooked. "I think so, honey." "I think she would have loved it." Tessa nodded, satisfied, and went back to watching the lights. In that moment, Spencer promised himself that, somehow, he would find a way to bring the joy back to his daughter's eyes. He didn't know how, but there had to be a way. After all, Christmas had always been a time for miracles, even when they seemed impossible. After putting Tessa to bed, Spencer had trouble falling asleep. It was after 3 in the morning when he finally dozed off, only to be awakened a few hours later by the silence. It was strange how the absence of sound could be so disturbing. No hurried footsteps of Tessa running to see the presents, no excited shout of "Santa came." The clock read 7:13 a.m., Christmas. Spencer got up and put a robe on over his pajamas. He peeked into Tessa's room. She was still asleep, hugging her mother's doll. He decided not to wake her. He went downstairs and headed to the kitchen to make coffee. Through the window, he saw that the snow had piled up during the night, covering the entire yard like a soft blanket. As the coffee maker worked, Spencer noticed a movement outside, near the garage entrance. He frowned and moved closer to the window. Someone was going through the trash cans. At first, he thought it might be an animal, maybe a raccoon looking for food. But then he realized it was a figure far too small, wearing what looked like a large, worn-out coat. A child. Spencer felt his heart clench. A child rummaging through the trash on Christmas morning. Without a second thought, he put on his shoes and coat. The temperature outside was several degrees below freezing. The snow crunched under his feet as he walked toward the trash cans. As he got closer, he saw it was a little girl, probably not much older than Tessa. She was wearing an adult's coat that swallowed her. The sleeves rolled up several times so she could use her hands. Her dark hair was tangled and dirty, and her cheeks were red from the cold. She didn't notice Spencer approaching, focused on something she had found among the trash bags, a round worn button that she was examining as if it were a treasure. "Hello?" Spencer said, keeping his voice soft so as not to startle her. Even so, the girl jumped back like a wild animal, clutching the button tightly, her eyes wide with fear. She was ready to run. "I'm not going to hurt you," Spencer assured her, staying where he was. "It's cold out here. Don't you want to come inside and have something warm to drink?" The girl didn't answer, just watched Spencer with suspicion. Her eyes were a deep brown, but what was most striking was the weariness they held, the eyes of someone who had already seen too much for their age. "My name is Spencer," he continued, trying to smile. "I live in this house with my daughter, Tessa. She's 5. How old are you?" The girl hesitated, then held up an open hand, showing 5 dirty fingers. "5?" Spencer asked, and she nodded. "Are you hungry?" Another nod, more timid this time. Spencer noticed she was shivering despite the large coat. Her shoes were soaked through by the snow and she wasn't wearing gloves. From the state of her clothes and appearance, it looked like she had been on the streets for some time. "Where are your parents?" The girl looked down and didn't answer. Spencer understood he had touched a sensitive spot. He stood in silence for a moment, thinking about what to do. He couldn't just leave her there in the cold alone on Christmas morning. But he also knew he shouldn't force her. He needed to earn her trust. Slowly, he crouched down to her level, keeping a safe distance so as not to scare her further. He felt an impulse he couldn't explain. It wasn't just pity or the Christmas spirit. It was something deeper, as if this meeting had a greater purpose. With his voice trembling slightly from emotion and the cold, he asked, "Do you want to spend Christmas with me as my daughter?" The words came out almost without thinking. Spencer was surprised by what he had just said, but he didn't take back the offer. Something told him it was the right thing to do. The girl looked up, scared and exhausted. The initial fear seemed mixed with a flicker of hope so fragile it hurt to see. "I was looking for food," she finally said, her small voice almost swallowed by the wind. "It's really cold out here." Spencer nodded, his heart aching. "I have plenty of food inside, and it's warm." The girl looked at the house, then at Spencer, as if assessing whether she could trust him. After a moment that seemed to last an eternity, she took a hesitant step toward him. "What's your name?" he asked, relieved that she had accepted. "Ruby," she answered in a voice so low he almost didn't hear it. "Ruby," Spencer repeated, smiling. "That's a beautiful name." He held out his hand, and after a brief hesitation, she placed her small, cold fingers in his palm. Spencer wanted to pick her up and carry her quickly inside, but he knew he had to go slow. That trust was too fragile to risk. They walked to the house together, the snow crunching under their feet. Spencer noticed how Ruby looked at everything. The Christmas decorations in the yard, the lights on the porch, the big windows, with a mix of fascination and distrust, as if she feared it could all disappear at any moment. At the entrance, Spencer opened the door and gestured for her to go in first. Ruby took a step inside and stopped, amazed by the warmth that instantly enveloped her. Ruby entered slowly, looking at everything cautiously. Her eyes scanned the high ceiling, the decorated walls, the Christmas ornaments, and the lit-up tree in the living room. She seemed unsure of where to focus first, absorbing every detail as if trying to memorize it all. "What a beautiful house," as she whispered, still clutching the button tightly. "I've never had one." Spencer felt a lump in his throat. The simplicity of that sentence carried a world of hardship he could barely imagine. "Thank you," Ruby said suddenly, surprising Spencer. "Oh, for letting me in." "You don't have to thank me," he replied, touched by the girl's gratitude for something as basic as shelter from the cold. "I'll get something warm for you. You must be hungry." Ruby nodded, her eyes shining at the mention of food. Spencer led her to the kitchen, where he started making hot chocolate and setting out some cookies. "Daddy?" The sleepy voice came from the kitchen doorway. Tessa was standing there, rubbing her eyes, still in her pajamas and holding her mother's doll. She looked curiously at the stranger in the kitchen. "Good morning, Princess," Spencer said, trying to sound natural. "Merry Christmas, this is Ruby. She's going to spend the day with us." Tessa looked at Ruby with curiosity. Ruby, in turn, shrank back slightly, as if wanting to become invisible. Spencer served hot chocolate for all three of them and put some cookies on a plate. He took everything to the living room, where the Christmas tree shone with the unopened presents underneath it. "Let's sit here," he suggested, pointing to the plush rug near the fireplace. "It's warmer." As they drank the chocolate in silence, Spencer noticed that Ruby seemed to be relaxing more and more, the warmth and food starting to take effect. Her face was less tense, and she occasionally cast curious glances at Tessa and her doll. After a few minutes of silence, Ruby spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "I used to live on the street with my mom," she began, looking at the chocolate in her mug instead of at the people. "But she got sick and—" She didn't wake up. The simplicity of the phrase made Spencer's chest tighten. So few words to describe such a huge tragedy. Tessa looked at Ruby for a long moment. Then, hugging her doll to her chest, she confessed in a low voice, "I lost my mommy too. I miss her so much." The two girls stared at each other, and something invisible seemed to pass between them. A mutual recognition, a shared pain that created a connection words couldn't express. Spencer watched that moment in silence, feeling like both a witness and an intruder. There was a wisdom in the way children could acknowledge each other's pain without embarrassment or discomfort. Just acceptance. Outside, the snow continued to fall softly, covering the world in a white, silent blanket. Inside the house, something new and fragile was beginning to be born. A connection, a beginning, maybe even a family. It was, after all, Christmas Day. And maybe miracles were still possible. The girls remained silent after sharing their losses. The chocolate in their mugs grew cold as they digested the discovery that, despite their very different circumstances, they shared a similar pain. Spencer discreetly moved away, allowing them to have their moment. He went to the kitchen to prepare more cookies, keeping an eye on the living room. He could feel the beginning of something important happening there, as fragile as a newborn sprout. Through the kitchen window, he saw that the snow was still falling. The yard was completely white now, the outlines of the bushes softened under the thick layer. A few children passed by on the street, pulling new sleds, Christmas presents. Their laughter came muffled through the glass. Spencer thought about how life could change in a matter of hours. That morning, he had woken up feeling the crushing weight of Hannah's absence, worried about how to make Tessa smile again. Now, his home sheltered a strange child, and his daughter was interacting with someone for the first time in months. He put another batch of cookies in to bake and turned his attention back to the living room. The silence between the girls stretched on for several minutes. Ruby remained huddled in her corner of the rug, still holding the button she had found in the trash, while Tessa hugged her doll, lost in thought. Occasionally, one would cast a curious glance at the other when she thought she wasn't being watched. The ornaments on the Christmas tree reflected the firelight from the fireplace, creating little sparkling dots throughout the room. The presents were still untouched under the branches. Spencer wondered if he should suggest they open them, but something told him the right moment hadn't arrived yet. Finally, Tessa took a deep breath. Her small shoulders rose and fell with determination. She hesitated for a moment, biting her lower lip as she always did when she was nervous, a gesture she had inherited from Hannah. Then she asked, "Do you want to play with me?" Her voice sounded shy yet determined. It was the first time in months that Spencer had heard his daughter invite someone to play. Since the funeral, Tessa had rejected all attempts at connection from her school friends, preferring to be alone with her dolls and her thoughts. Ruby looked at Tessa in surprise, as if she hadn't expected that. Her dark eyes widened slightly, and she shook her head awkwardly, not in refusal, but in a gesture that seemed to say, "I don't know how." Tessa seemed to understand. Without another word, she got up and walked over to a low shelf on the other side of the room, where some of her toys were kept. Spencer watched as she carefully examined the options, touching a few teddy bears, passing by some colorful books, until she finally chose a doll with blonde hair and a pink dress. This wasn't just any doll, it was Princess Star, one of Tessa's favorites, a gift from her last birthday that she rarely let other children touch. Not even her best friends from school were allowed to play with her. Spencer held his breath, realizing the significance of the gesture. Tessa returned and held the doll out to Ruby. "You can play with her, I'll let you," she said seriously, as if offering a priceless treasure. Ruby looked at the doll, then at Tessa in disbelief. Her eyes scanned the shiny pink dress, the small sparkling shoes, the perfectly combed blonde hair. Slowly, as if afraid the offer might be withdrawn at any moment, she reached out her hands. Her dirty fingers contrasted with the doll's pink dress, making her hesitate. "It's okay," Tessa assured her, pushing the doll a little closer. "She doesn't mind. And we can wash our hands later." Ruby finally took the doll, holding it so carefully that she seemed to fear it would break at the slightest touch. Her eyes widened at the weight of the toy in her hands, as if she wasn't used to holding something so new and intact. "Does she have a name?" Ruby asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Jaya Princess Star," Tessa replied, pronouncing the name with childish reverence. "Because she has little stars on her dress. Look!" Tessa pointed to the small, shiny details embroidered on the doll's dress. Ruby looked on in wonder, gently running her finger over them. "Are they real?" she asked, referring to the little sparkles. "No, silly," Tessa laughed softly. "They're pretend, but we pretend they're real." Ruby nodded, absorbing that information as if it were an important lesson. Maybe it was. Spencer thought about how many basic things about play and imagination this girl might have missed out on, living on the streets. Slowly, Tessa sat down next to Ruby, closing the distance between them. She picked up the rag doll that had belonged to her mother and began to show how she played with the two of them together. "This is Lily," she explained, holding up the worn rag doll. She's Princess Star's best friend. They have lots of adventures together. Ruby listened attentively, her eyes moving from one doll to the other, as if trying to understand the dynamic between them. "I'll show you how to brush her hair," Tessa offered, pulling a small plastic comb from her pajama pocket. It was a pink comb with little decorative flowers. "You have to do it like this, very slowly, so you don't hurt her," Tessa demonstrated, gently passing the comb through the doll's synthetic hair with delicate, careful movements. Her small fingers worked with a skill that came from practice. "It's like taking care of a baby," she explained. "You have to be patient." Ruby watched every movement intently, her eyes absorbing the technique like a sponge. After a moment, Tessa offered her the comb. "Do you want to try?" With slightly trembling hands, Ruby accepted the comb and began to run it through the doll's hair, imitating the movements Tessa had shown her. The comb snagged on a knot and she stopped, alarmed, looking at Tessa, afraid she had ruined something. "It's okay," Tessa said, helping her. "Sometimes her hair gets messy. We just have to be patient. Like this. Look." Tessa showed her how to gently untangle the comb without pulling the hair hard. Ruby tried again, this time more successfully. "You're doing great," Tessa praised, watching Ruby's now more confident movements. A small smile appeared on Ruby's lips, so brief it almost went unnoticed. It was the first time Spencer had seen her smile, and the gesture completely transformed her face, lighting up her eyes and softening the lines of worry that seemed permanent on her forehead. The two began to play together, still shy but visibly curious about each other. Tessa explained the unwritten rules of her doll world, and Ruby listened attentively, as if learning a new and precious language. "Princess Star lives in a huge castle," Tessa narrated, building the imaginary setting. "It has gardens and fountains and lots of horses, but sometimes she gets tired of being a princess and goes to explore the forest with Lily." "Are there monsters in the forest?" Ruby asked, her eyes large and serious. Tessa thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But Princess Star isn't afraid. She has magic powers." "What kind of powers?" "She can make plants grow and talk to animals," Tessa explained. "And when she gets really scared, she can turn invisible." Ruby considered this information, looking impressed. "I wish I could turn invisible," she admitted in a low voice. Spencer, watching from the kitchen doorway, felt a pang in his chest. How many times had that little girl wished to disappear, to become invisible to escape difficult or dangerous situations? The thought was devastating, but Tessa just nodded, without questioning it. "When we play, you can be invisible," she said simply. "We just have to pretend." Ruby seemed satisfied with this solution. The two continued their game, building a story where the dolls explored enchanted forests and met magical animals. The world of the dolls expanded to include other adventures: underwater kingdoms, flights on friendly dragons, rescuing fairies trapped in spider webs. Spencer watched, feeling a flicker of hope grow in his chest. Seeing Tessa interact with another child, sharing her toys, explaining her games, these were things that hadn't happened in months. Since Hannah had passed, Tessa had closed herself off in her own world, even rejecting invitations from the children she used to play with at school. And there she was, building a bridge to someone else, someone who, like her, carried a loss too great for her small shoulders. The smell of freshly baked cookies filled the house. Spencer returned to the kitchen to take them out of the oven. As he set them out to cool, he could hear snippets of the girls' conversation: imaginary kingdoms, adventures in enchanted forests, rescuing princesses. Their voices, at first hesitant, were gaining confidence, and sometimes a shy laugh would escape. It was the first time in 3 months he had heard Tessa laugh. The daylight slowly faded, the golden rays of the winter sun giving way to the deep blue of twilight. Spencer realized it was already getting dark. Christmas was passing without them having opened the presents or done any of the traditions he had planned. Curiously, that no longer seemed so important. He looked at the clock, almost 6 in the evening. It was time to think about dinner. He had bought a small turkey and prepared some side dishes the day before, thinking it would be just him and Tessa. Now, there was one more person at the table. The thought made him smile. He returned to the living room, where the girls were still absorbed in their game. The dolls were now carrying out a complex rescue of a prince trapped in a tower. "Girls, want to have dinner with me?" he called, gently interrupting their play. The two looked at him as if they had forgotten his presence. Tessa nodded immediately, getting up. Ruby seemed less certain, looking at the doll in her hands as if she didn't know what to do with it. "You can bring the doll," Tessa said, noticing her hesitation. "She can have dinner with us. Lily is coming too." Ruby smiled again, a small but real smile, a little more confident than the first. Spencer felt a wave of gratitude for his daughter, for her sensitivity in understanding what Ruby needed, without anything being said. In the kitchen, Spencer had already set the table with the best china, the porcelain plates with gold rims that were usually saved for special occasions. He lit 2 candles in the center of the table and placed the turkey on a large platter, surrounded by roasted potatoes, corn, gravy, and other typical Christmas dishes. "We need to wash our hands before we eat," he reminded them, leading the girls to the kitchen sink. He helped them reach the faucet, noticing how Ruby watched the running water with fascination, as if it was something new. For her, perhaps it was. Spencer wondered how long it had been since she had access to basic things like clean water and soap. After helping the girls, Spencer grabbed 2 extra chairs, one for each doll, placing them between Tessa and Ruby. The girls settled their dolls in the chairs, arranging them carefully so they would be comfortable. "Do the dolls need to eat too?" Spencer asked, joining in the game. "Not for real," Tessa explained patiently. "We just pretend they're eating." Spencer nodded seriously, as if he had learned something important. He served the girls plates, putting generous portions on Ruby's, who stared at the food with wide eyes. "You can eat," he encouraged her, realizing she was waiting for some kind of permission. Ruby picked up the fork awkwardly, as if not used to using silverware. She watched Tessa for a moment, imitating her movements. When she finally brought a piece of turkey to her mouth, she closed her eyes for an instant, savoring it. "Is it good?" Spencer asked. Ruby nodded vigorously, her mouth still full. When she swallowed, she spoke in a low voice. "I've never had food this good." Spencer felt his heart clench. He wanted to ask more about her life, about what had happened to her mother, about how long she had been on the streets. But he knew it wasn't the right time. Ruby was just beginning to relax, to trust. Too many questions might make her shut down again. At the table, as they ate, Spencer noticed how Ruby looked at every detail with a mix of fascination and fear. The folded napkins, the crystal glasses, the lit candles in the center of the table. Her eyes scanned the room as if she were in a museum, where everything could be admired but not touched. Tessa chatted excitedly about other Christmases, about presents she had received in previous years, about how they used to build snowmen in the yard. Ruby listened attentively, her eyes shining with the stories of a life so different from her own. At one point, when there was a pause in the conversation, Ruby spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes I slept in a box, to stay out of the wind." The comment, so simple and honest, landed like a stone in the middle of the conversation. Tessa stopped talking and looked at Ruby, her eyes welling up with an understanding of what that meant. Spencer felt a lump in his throat. The image of that tiny girl sleeping in a cardboard box in the cold was devastating. "And where did you sleep last night?" he asked gently. Ruby looked away, embarrassed. "In the alley behind the market. There were some big boxes there." Spencer took a deep breath, trying to control the emotion that threatened to overflow. He thought about what he should do. Technically, he should call social services. It was the correct procedure, but it was Christmas. No one would answer until after the holiday, and the idea of sending Ruby back to the street was unthinkable. "It's very cold tonight," he finally said. "If you want, you can sleep here. Just for tonight." Ruby's face lit up with hope, but she quickly tried to hide it, as if afraid to show too much. "Can I?" she asked, almost inaudibly. "Of course," Spencer confirmed. "We have a guest room you can use." "She can sleep in my room," Tessa offered excitedly. "I have a big bed." Spencer smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm, but shook his head. I think it's better for Ruby to have her own space tonight, to get a good rest. After dinner, while Tessa helped clear the table, a task she usually rejected, Spencer prepared the guest room. He changed the sheets, found an old pair of Tessa's pajamas that might fit Ruby, and set out a clean towel for a bath. When he returned, he found the girls in the living room, Tessa showing her other toys to Ruby, who watched everything with admiration. Tessa had set up what looked like a small puppet theater using sofa cushions, and the dolls were positioned as the audience. "Ruby, how about a warm bath before bed?" Spencer suggested. "I've set out some clean clothes that I think will fit you," Ruby agreed shyly, following Spencer to the bathroom. He showed her how to adjust the water temperature, where the towels and soap were, and left her alone for privacy, saying he'd be right outside if she needed help. While he waited, Spencer and Tessa sat in the hallway. "Is she going to live with us?" Tessa asked, surprising Spencer with the direct question. "I don't know, honey," he answered honestly. "For now, she's spending the night. Then we'll see what's best for her." Tessa nodded, considering the answer. "I like her," she said simply. Spencer smiled, putting his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Me too." 15 minutes later, Ruby emerged from the bathroom transformed. With her hair clean and still damp, her face flushed from the warm steam, and wearing the unicorn pajamas that had been Tessa's, she looked like a different child, younger, more vulnerable, more as she should be, just a 5-year-old girl. Spencer led her to the guest room he had prepared. He had put some fairy lights around the window, creating a cozy and magical atmosphere. Ruby entered slowly, looking around in amazement at the large bed with clean sheets, the lamp on the nightstand, the heavy curtains that kept the cold out. "This will be your room tonight," he said, adjusting the thermostat. "If you need anything, my room is at the end of the hall and Tessa's is next door." Ruby nodded, still looking at everything as if she couldn't believe it. Tessa appeared at the door, also in her pajamas, holding her rag doll. "Do you want me to tell you a story before you sleep?" she offered. "Daddy always tells me one." Spencer smiled, touched by the offer. "How about I tell a story to both of you?" he suggested. The girls agreed, and Spencer helped Ruby climb into bed. She lay down carefully, as if afraid of getting the white sheets dirty. Tessa, much more at ease, climbed up too and sat beside her. Spencer told a story about 2 princesses who got lost in the forest and found their way back by following the stars. When he finished, Tessa was already yawning, ready to go to her own room. "Good night, Ruby," she said, giving her new friend a quick hug before leaving. "We'll play more tomorrow." After Tessa left, Spencer tucked the blankets around Ruby, who was still looking around as if wanting to commit every detail of the room to memory. "Are you comfortable?" he asked. Ruby nodded, sinking a little deeper into the soft pillow. "I've never slept in a bed like this," she confessed. Spencer smiled, lightly touching her still damp hair. "Sleep well, Ruby. I'll be here if you need anything." He turned off the main light, leaving only the lamp on, and walked to the door. Before leaving, he looked back and saw Ruby beginning to close her eyes, her small body visibly relaxing under the warm blankets. For the first time in a long time, Ruby fell asleep without fear. Outside the window, the snow continued to fall silently, covering the world in a pure white blanket. Inside the house, something equally pure was being born. A connection, a beginning, maybe even a family. Spencer thought of Hannah, of how she would have approved of what was happening, how she would have opened her arms to Ruby without hesitation. It was, after all, Christmas Day, and maybe miracles were still possible. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the curtains of the guest room, painting golden stripes on the carpet. Ruby stirred under the covers, slowly opening her eyes. For a moment, she was confused, not recognizing where she was. Then the memories of the previous night came back. The warm house, the delicious dinner, the hot bath, the soft bed. She sat up, looking around to confirm it hadn't all been a dream. The room was even more beautiful in the daylight. The soft blue walls, the dark wood dresser, the oval mirror on the wall. Everything seemed to come from one of the storybooks her mother occasionally managed to get for her. Ruby felt a pang of sadness thinking of her. It had only been 2 weeks, but it felt like an eternity. The days on the streets after she didn't wake up had been scary and confusing. Ruby didn't know where to go, what to do. She had just stayed near the places she knew, looking for food where she could, sleeping in sheltered corners. But now she was here in this beautiful room, in this warm house. It seemed too unreal to be true. As she tried to stand up, she felt a strange dizziness. Her head ached, and her throat was scratchy. Strange. Maybe it was from sleeping so much. She couldn't remember the last time she had slept a whole night without waking up several times, scared by noises or the cold. Ruby carefully got out of bed. The floor was warm under her bare feet, so different from the icy concrete she was used to. She walked to the window and peeked outside. The yard was covered in snow, bright and untouched under the morning sun. It looked like a postcard. A light knock on the door made her turn. Before she could answer, the door opened a few inches and Tessa's head appeared, her brown hair messy from sleep. "You're awake?" Tessa exclaimed, opening the door completely and entering the room. She was wearing different pajamas from the day before, these with little penguins printed on them. "Merry Christmas." Ruby blinked, surprised. She had completely forgotten it was Christmas Day. "Merry Christmas," she replied, her voice coming out hoarser than she expected. Tessa tilted her head, watching Ruby with curiosity. "Are you okay? Your voice sounds weird." Ruby swallowed with difficulty, feeling her throat scratch. "I think I have a cold," she admitted, realizing she must be sick. It wasn't surprising, considering the days she had spent in the cold. Tessa frowned, looking concerned. "I'll go get my dad. He always knows what to do when I'm sick." Before Ruby could say anything, Tessa had already run out. Ruby sat on the edge of the bed, feeling tired just from standing for a few minutes. Now that she realized she was sick, other symptoms began to appear. An aching body, a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature, a heavy head. A few minutes later, Spencer appeared at the door, with Tessa right behind him. He looked genuinely worried. "Good morning, Ruby," he greeted, entering the room. "Tessa told me you're not feeling well." Ruby nodded, not trusting her voice to say more than necessary. Spencer came closer and gently placed his hand on her forehead. "You're warm," he noted, frowning. "I'll get a thermometer." While Spencer left the room, Tessa approached Ruby, sitting beside her on the bed. "Don't worry," she said with the wisdom of a child who had been through many colds. "Daddy always makes me feel better really fast when I'm sick. He makes tea with honey and tells stories." Ruby tried to smile, but even that small effort felt tiring. Spencer returned with a thermometer, a glass of water and a small box of medicine. He asked Ruby to open her mouth and place the digital thermometer under her tongue. 100.48, he read when the device beeped. "It's not too high, but we need to take care of it." With an efficiency that came from experience, Spencer gave Ruby some fever medicine, making sure she took it with a full glass of water. "I'll make some tea that will help your throat," he said, "and bring some more blankets. In the meantime, you should stay in bed." Ruby obeyed, lying down again. Spencer adjusted the pillows so she was propped up, more comfortable for breathing. "I can turn on the TV for you to watch cartoons," Tessa offered. "I always watch them when I'm sick." Spencer smiled at his daughter. "Great idea, Tessa. Why don't you show Ruby how the remote works? I'll make the tea and be right back." As Spencer left the room, Tessa picked up the remote for the small television that sat on the dresser. She sat on the edge of the bed and began to explain the buttons with the seriousness of someone sharing important knowledge. "This one turns it on and off. This one changes the channel. And with these, you turn up the volume," she demonstrated, pointing to each button. Ruby watched with interest despite her discomfort. She had never had her own TV, and the few times she had watched anything had been through the windows of electronics stores or, occasionally, when her mother found work cleaning houses and took her along. Tessa found a cartoon channel and adjusted the volume to a comfortable level. Then, instead of leaving, she settled herself more comfortably on the bed next to Ruby. "I'll stay here with you until you feel better," she declared, with the simplicity and certainty of a 5-year-old. Ruby looked at her, surprised by the offer. She wasn't used to people wanting to be by her side, especially when she was sick. Her mother, of course, who always took care of her, But she worked so much that Ruby was often alone even when she wasn't feeling well. "You don't have to," she said, her voice still hoarse. "I know," Tessa replied simply, "but I want to. It's boring to be sick alone." Ruby smiled shyly, touched by the unpretentious kindness. The day before, they were strangers. Today, Tessa treated her as if they were old friends. Spencer returned a few minutes later with a tray. On it was a steaming cup of tea, some toast with jam, and a small jar of honey. "The tea will help with your throat," he explained, placing the tray on the nightstand. "And you need to eat something, even if you're not hungry. It helps your body fight the infection." Ruby accepted the cup he offered, feeling the comforting warmth between her hands. The tea had a soft herbal scent and a golden hue from the honey. "I already put the honey in," Spencer said. "It helps soothe your throat." Ruby took a small sip. The warm liquid went down smoothly, bringing immediate relief to her irritated throat. The taste was sweet and comforting. "Is it good?" Spencer asked. Ruby nodded, taking another sip. "Thank you," she murmured, still not used to receiving so much care from strangers. Spencer smiled. "You're welcome. Tessa, have you had breakfast yet?" Tessa shook her head. "I want to stay here with Ruby." Spencer considered for a moment, then nodded. "I'll bring you something to eat here, then. And the three of us can open the Christmas presents later, when Ruby is feeling a little better." Tessa's eyes lit up at the mention of presents, but she didn't move from Ruby's side. Spencer left again, returning shortly after with another tray, this one with cereal, fruit, and milk for Tessa. Throughout the morning, Spencer came in and out of the room, checking Ruby's temperature, bringing more water, adjusting the blankets. Tessa remained by her new friend's side, watching cartoons, occasionally explaining what was happening on the screen when she realized Ruby didn't know the story. Around noon, Ruby began to feel a little better. The medicine had helped bring the fever down, and the tea had eased the pain in her throat. She still felt tired, but not as bad as when she woke up. "Do you want to draw with me later?" Tessa asked, noticing the improvement. "I can get my colored pencils." Ruby considered the offer. Drawing sounded fun, something she hadn't done in a long time. "Do I'd like that," she answered, her voice still hoarse but a little stronger. Tessa smiled, excited, and ran to get her drawing supplies. She returned minutes later with a box of colored pencils, some crayons, and several sheets of paper. They spread the supplies over the bed, and Tessa immediately began to draw what looked like a house with a large tree next to it. Ruby picked up a blue pencil and started her own drawing, hesitant at first. She couldn't remember the last time she had done something like this, just for fun. As the girls talked quietly about their drawings, Spencer watched from the door, his heart full of conflicting emotions. There was concern, of course. Ruby was clearly not well, and he wondered how long she had been exposed to the cold before he found her. But there was also a strange sense of completeness, as if Ruby's presence had filled an empty space in the house he didn't even know existed. He watched how Tessa interacted with Ruby, patient, attentive, generous in a way she didn't show with other children. It was as if their shared loss created a secret language between them, an understanding that went beyond words. Spencer quietly stepped away, going downstairs to his office. He rummaged through a few drawers until he found what he was looking for. A small gift, wrapped with a blue ribbon that he had bought for Tessa months ago, but had never gotten around to giving her. It was a small doll, not as elaborate as Princess Star, but equally beautiful with its yellow dress and brown hair. Initially, he had thought of saving it for Tessa's birthday, but now it seemed like the perfect gift for Ruby. He went back upstairs, the gift hidden behind his back. The girls were absorbed in their drawings, trading colored pencils and commenting on their creations. Ruby had drawn what looked like a night sky full of stars over a small house. "That's very beautiful," Spencer commented, looking over Ruby's shoulder. She blushed slightly at the compliment, not used to receiving praise for her creations. "Thank you," she murmured, tilting her head shyly. Spencer knelt beside the bed, bringing the gift forward. "I thought you might like this," he said, offering the package to Ruby. Her eyes widened in surprise. She looked at Spencer, then at the gift, clearly unsure how to react. "For me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Yes," Spencer confirmed, smiling. "Everyone deserves a Christmas present." Ruby tremulously reached out and took the package. She felt clumsy, as if she didn't know exactly what to do with it. "You can open it," Tessa encouraged, excited. "I love opening presents." Carefully, as if afraid of damaging the paper, Ruby began to unwrap the gift. Her fingers moved slowly, untying the ribbon with care, peeling off the tape without tearing the paper. It was as if the act of unwrapping itself was as precious as what was inside. When she finally opened the paper, revealing the brown-haired doll in a yellow dress, Ruby froze, just staring. Her expression was one of pure admiration. I've never had anything like this," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. Spencer felt a lump in his throat. Such a simple sentence, yet it carried a lifetime of deprivation. "She's beautiful," Tessa exclaimed. "What are you going to name her?" Ruby touched the doll's face with her fingertips, as if touching something alive and fragile. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never named a doll before." "You can take your time to think," Spencer said. "There's no rush." Ruby nodded, still amazed by the gift. Tessa was already chattering about how the new doll could be friends with Princess Star and Lily, planning adventures for the trio. The rest of the day passed peacefully. Ruby's fever returned in the mid-afternoon, but another dose of medicine and more tea helped control it. Spencer brought a light lunch, chicken soup and toast, which Ruby managed to eat a little of. Later, the girls opened the other Christmas presents, with Tessa insisting that Ruby help her, including her in the celebration as if she had always been a part of it. As the sun began to set, casting orange shadows across the room, Ruby seemed tired again. Spencer suggested she rest for a bit, and even Tessa agreed it was time for a break from playing. "I'll prepare something light for dinner," Spencer said. "Tessa, why don't you come help me in the kitchen and let Ruby rest for a bit?" Tessa reluctantly agreed, promising to be back soon. After they left, Ruby was alone with her thoughts and her new doll. She looked at the toy in her hands, still barely believing it was hers. A gift, given freely with nothing expected in return. The family's generosity confused her. Why were they being so nice to her? How long would it last? In her short life, Ruby had already learned that good things rarely lasted. Her mother always said they shouldn't get attached to places or things. They never knew when they would have to leave. At the end of the day, when Spencer returned with a tray of hot soup and bread, Ruby had made a decision. She held the doll against her chest, clutching it as if it were her most precious possession, which, in fact, it was. "Thank you," she said, her voice hesitant, after taking a few sips of the soup. "For everything. For the room, the food, the doll. But I think it's time for me to go." Spencer, who was adjusting the blankets, stopped and looked at her in surprise. "Go? Where to?" Ruby looked away, not answering. She had nowhere to go, really. She just knew she couldn't stay here forever, taking advantage of these people's kindness. Spencer shook his head gently. "You're still sick, Ruby. And it's snowing outside." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You can stay until I decide what we're going to do." Ruby looked up, meeting his eyes, searching for signs that he wasn't serious, but all she saw was sincerity and concern. "Really?" she asked, her voice small. "Really," Spencer confirmed, smiling lightly. "Now get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." As Spencer left the room, Ruby leaned back against the pillows, still holding the doll. Through the window, she could see snowflakes falling gently, illuminated by the garden lights. It was cold and dark outside, but in here, it was warm and safe. Maybe, just maybe, she could stay a little longer, just until she felt better. Just until Spencer decided what to do, and in the meantime, she could pretend she belonged in this place, with this family. With that comforting thought, Ruby closed her eyes, the doll still in her arms, and drifted off into a peaceful, healing sleep. The days passed slowly, turning into weeks. January arrived, bringing new snowfalls and even more intense cold, but inside Spencer's house, a different kind of warmth was beginning to spread. Ruby fully recovered from the flu after a few days of care. Spencer had called social services right after Christmas, as he knew he should. He explained the situation, and after a visit from a social worker, was granted emergency temporary custody, given the special circumstances and the holiday season. There would be more visits, more paperwork to fill out, more decisions to be made. But for now, Ruby could stay. At first, she walked around the house as if on eggshells, always alert, always careful not to take up too much space, not to make noise, not to be a bother. She would wake up early and make her bed with military precision, fold the borrowed clothes with meticulous care, and ask permission for practically everything, to get a glass of water, to sit on the sofa, to turn on the television. "Ruby, this is your home now," Spencer would say gently, every time he saw her hesitate. "You don't need to ask permission to feel comfortable." Gradually, almost imperceptibly, Ruby began to relax. One morning, Spencer found her in the kitchen, already dressed, curiously watching the coffee maker as it worked. "Do you like the smell of coffee?" he asked. "It's nice," she replied, inhaling deeply. "My mum loved coffee, but we rarely had it." It was the first time she had mentioned her mother without her voice breaking with sadness, a small step forward. In the following mornings, it became a routine. Ruby would come downstairs, still sleepy but already dressed, and sit at the kitchen table while Spencer made coffee. She didn't drink it, of course. It was just hot chocolate for her and Tessa, but she liked being there, taking in the aroma that filled the kitchen, watching Spencer's familiar movements. Tessa, for her part, spent more and more time out of her room. Before Ruby's arrival, she used to isolate herself for hours, playing alone with her dolls or simply lying down, staring at the ceiling. Now, she was almost always in the living room or Ruby's room, inventing new games. One afternoon, Spencer returned from work. He had resumed his office routine after New Year's and found the living room transformed. Sofa cushions formed a sort of fort, draped sheets created walls and ceilings, and from inside the makeshift structure came laughter and excited voices. And then Princess Star said, "I'm not afraid of dragons." It was Tessa's voice, more alive and animated than Spencer had heard in months. And Daisy replied, "Me neither," Ruby's voice added, followed by more laughter. Spencer stood for a moment, just listening. Daisy was the name Ruby had chosen for her doll with the yellow dress. It had taken her days to decide, considering each option seriously, until she finally announced her choice during dinner for general approval. The afternoons became filled with drawings and stories. Spencer bought a large pad of paper and more colored pencils, and the girls would spend hours creating imaginary worlds. The refrigerator doors soon became covered in colorful drawings, castles, princesses, friendly dragons, and invariably 3 figures holding hands that Spencer recognized as himself, Tessa and Ruby. There were also the quieter moments. After dinner, the 3 of them would sit on the sofa to watch a movie or a children's show. At first, Ruby would sit on the edge, keeping a respectful distance. As the weeks passed, she began to move closer, until one night, without realizing it, she rested her head on Spencer's arm while they watched a cartoon about lions. When he looked down, surprised by the contact, she was almost asleep, relaxed and confident enough to let her guard down. The nights also brought changes. The first few weeks were marked by nightmares. Ruby would wake up crying, calling for her mother. Spencer would find her huddled in bed, trembling, afraid she had made too much noise, that she had been a bother. He would sit beside her, speak in a low, reassuring voice, sometimes telling stories until she fell back asleep. Gradually, the nightmares lessened. The nights became more peaceful. Ruby began to sleep through the night, secure in the knowledge that when she woke up, the world would not have fallen apart during her sleep. The school routine also began. Spencer enrolled Ruby in the same school Tessa attended. The social worker had helped get the necessary documents and explained the special situation to the school administration. On the first day, Ruby held Tessa's hand tightly as they walked to the gate. Tessa, taking on the role of protector and guide, showed her where everything was, introduced her to the other children, and stayed by her side during recess. "How was school?" Spencer asked that afternoon as he drove them home. Good, Ruby replied from the back seat. The teacher is nice. And there's a library with lots of books. Ruby read a whole story to the class, Tessa added, proud. The teacher was impressed. Ruby blushed at the praise, but Spencer could see the small smile of satisfaction on her face in the rearview mirror. Every small achievement was celebrated. The first A on a school assignment. The first time Ruby asked to have a school friend over to play. The first drawing she proudly hung in her room. No longer the guest room, but Ruby's room, with newly painted light green walls, her favorite color, and shelves for her new books and toys. For Spencer, the changes were just as profound. The pain of losing Hannah hadn't disappeared. It would never completely go away, but it now shared space with other feelings. There was purpose in caring for two young children, in ensuring they both felt safe and loved. There was joy in seeing Tessa return to being the lively girl she was before, and in witnessing Ruby blossom from a scared, distrustful child into a curious and increasingly confident little girl. The mornings became moments of anticipation, no longer of heavy silence. The sound of little footsteps running down the hall, muffled laughter coming from some corner of the house, lively discussions about which cartoon to watch. The house was alive again. Spencer often watched all of this from the doorway. He would stop for a moment on his way to the kitchen or the office and just watch the two girls playing, drawing, talking in their own secret language. He felt his heart expand with something he recognized as gratitude. On one of those afternoons, as he watched them sitting on the living room rug, surrounded by colorful drawings and dolls in dramatic poses, Spencer realized a simple truth. The sadness that once seemed permanent was giving way to something new. It wasn't the same happiness as before, it never would be. It was a different kind of joy, more mature perhaps, born from the recognition of life's fragility and the preciousness of shared moments, a joy that, little by little, was once again filling every corner of the house and his heart. February arrived with biting winds and afternoons that darkened early. The snow that fell was no longer the fluffy, inviting snow of December, but a hard, persistent snow that piled up on the sidewalks and made the streets slippery. The trees, with their bare branches, looked like charcoal drawings against the grey sky. Spencer was in his home office, reviewing some work documents. The past few weeks had been a complicated dance between his professional responsibilities and the girls' needs. He had reduced his hours at the office, negotiated remote work days, and reorganized his schedule to be present for the important moments. School meetings, doctor's appointments, daily routines that the girls needed to feel secure. The social worker, Mrs. Patel, had been visiting regularly. Her last report had been positive. Ruby was adapting well, attending school, showing healthy signs of adjustment. But there were also questions hanging in the air, not yet verbalized during these visits. What would the permanent arrangement be? Were there other relatives who might take custody? What was the long-term plan? Spencer knew these questions would eventually require concrete answers. The temporary custody couldn't last forever. A soft sound at the office door interrupted his thoughts. Tessa was standing there, hugging her rag doll, with the contemplative look that sometimes made Spencer forget she was only 5. "Hi, Princess," he greeted, swiveling his chair to face her. "Do you need something?" "Can I stay here with you?" she asked. "Ruby is resting." Ruby had caught a slight cold, nothing as serious as the first time, but her teacher had suggested she stay home for a day or two. Tessa, ever the protector, had insisted on staying with her during the morning, telling stories and offering water like a miniature nurse. "Fair, of course," Spencer replied, opening his arms. "Come here." Tessa crossed the office and climbed into her father's lap, settling in comfortably. She rested her head on his shoulder, sighing in a way that seemed to hold all the wisdom in the world. For a few minutes, they just sat like that, in silence. Spencer could feel his daughter's soft breathing, the small weight of her body against his, her soft hair tickling his chin. It was moments like these that made him realize how much she had grown in the last few months, not just in inches, but in maturity. "What are you thinking about?" he finally asked, noticing that Tessa was unusually quiet. She took her time answering, as if organizing her thoughts. "Daddy, is Ruby going to leave?" The question, asked in a low voice, hit Spencer like a punch to the stomach. Not because it was unexpected, he had been thinking about it himself, but because hearing Tessa say it made the issue more real, more urgent. "Why are you asking that now?" he replied, buying time. Tessa fiddled with a button on his shirt, avoiding his gaze. "I heard you talking to that lady, the one who comes to see Ruby." "Mrs. Patel?" "Yeah." Tessa wrinkled her nose slightly. "You were talking about permanent arrangements and long-term options. That means she's going to leave, right?" Spencer felt a pang of guilt. He thought he had been careful with those conversations, but of course Tessa, observant as she was, would pick up on fragments, and like all children, she would probably interpret them in the worst possible way. "Not necessarily," he answered carefully. "Mrs. Patel is just doing her job, making sure we're taking good care of Ruby and thinking about what's best for her in the future. But does she have to leave? To another family?" Tessa's voice had a touch of desperation that made Spencer's heart ache. "We haven't decided anything yet, Tessa. We're just talking about possibilities." Tessa lifted her head, looking directly into Spencer's eyes with surprising intensity. "I always wanted a sister," she declared firmly. "Now I have one. We can't send her away." The simplicity of that statement, "now I have one," struck Spencer deeply. At some point, without grand declarations or ceremonies, Ruby had become Tessa's sister. Not just a friend or a temporary companion, but a sister. "Ruby is happy here," Tessa continued, her small voice full of conviction. "She smiles now, and she tells stories, and she doesn't have as many nightmares. If she leaves, she'll be sad again. I'll be sad too. You'll be sad. Everyone will be sad." The childish logic was impeccable in its simplicity. Spencer couldn't argue with it. "Besides," Tessa added, as if offering the ultimate argument, "she already has a room here, with green walls, and her dolls get sad when she goes to school. Imagine if she leaves forever." Spencer couldn't help a small smile at that reasoning. But behind the smile, his mind was working quickly. The truth was, he had been thinking about this for weeks, considering options, imagining possibilities. Mrs. Patel's visits, though friendly and positive, served as a constant reminder that a decision had to be made. "Daddy," Tessa's voice brought him back to the present. "Are you listening?" "I am, Princess," he assured her. "I'm thinking about what you said." "And what do you think?" Spencer took a deep breath, looking out the office window. Outside, the first signs of a new snowfall were beginning to appear, small flakes floating lazily in the air. He thought about the last 2 months, about how the house had transformed since Ruby's arrival. He thought about how Tessa had re-emerged from the shell of silence she had hidden in after Hannah's death. He thought about Ruby, her daily progress, her laugh that now came more frequently, how she was beginning to believe that the ground beneath her feet wouldn't suddenly disappear. And he understood that, deep down, his heart had already decided. Maybe it had decided that Christmas morning when he saw a small figure rummaging through the trash, looking for something, anything, to hold on to. "I think you're right, Tessa," he finally said, kissing the top of his daughter's head. "We would all be very sad if Ruby left." Tessa lifted her face, hope shining in her eyes, "So she can stay forever." "I'll do everything I can to make that happen," Spencer promised. "There are a lot of details to work out, a lot of papers to fill out, a lot of conversations to have. But yes, if Ruby wants to, and if Mrs. Patel and the judges agree, she can stay. Forever." Tessa threw her arms around her father's neck, hugging him with all the strength her small arms allowed. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered against his neck. "You're the best dad in the whole world." Spencer closed his eyes, hugging his daughter back. He knew the road ahead would be complicated. Adoption was not a simple process. But he also knew that some decisions, once made by the heart, simply have to be followed. The morning after his conversation with Tessa, Spencer woke up with a clarity he hadn't felt in a long time. He sat on the edge of the bed for a few minutes, looking at the photograph of Hannah on the nightstand. She was smiling in the way he loved most, sideways, with a mischievous glint in her eyes, as if sharing a private joke with whoever was looking. "What would you think of this, Han?" he asked in silence. He didn't expect an answer, of course, but somehow he knew what it would be. Hannah had always had an open heart, an infinite capacity to love. She would have brought Ruby inside without a second thought. After breakfast, while the girls were distracted watching cartoons in the living room, Spencer retreated to his office and made the call. Mrs. Patel answered on the second ring. "Mr. Lawson, what a surprise. We only had a visit scheduled for next week." "I know," he replied, his voice firmer than he expected. "But I've made a decision and I didn't want to wait. I would like to start the adoption process for Ruby." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. "I see," she finally said, and Spencer detected a note of satisfaction in her voice. "I must confess, I suspected this would be the outcome. I can see how well Ruby has integrated into your family." "So, is it possible?" Spencer asked, surprised by how easily she accepted the idea. "Possible, yes. Easy or fast, no," Mrs. Patel warned. "There are many steps in the adoption process. Additional evaluations of your financial and psychological situation, a full background check, more home visits, preparatory courses for adoptive parents. And, of course, we need to consider if there are any of Ruby's relatives who might claim custody. As far as we know, there's no one," Spencer said. "Her mother had no contact with her family from what Ruby says." "Even so, we'll have to verify," the social worker insisted. "It's standard procedure. But if there really are no relatives, and considering that Ruby is already settled in your home and has a strong bond with you, your chances are good." Spencer felt a cautious sense of relief. "What do I need to do now?" "I'll email you the initial forms today. Fill them out carefully. We'll schedule a meeting to discuss the next steps." She paused. "And Mr. Lawson, have you spoken to Ruby about this?" "Not yet," he admitted. "I wanted to be sure it was a real possibility before getting her hopes up." "Understandable. But that conversation needs to happen soon. Her opinion is crucial in this process, especially since she's old enough to express her wishes." "I'll do it today," Spencer promised. After hanging up, he sat for some time, organizing his thoughts. The conversation with Mrs. Patel had made everything more real. There was a long road ahead, full of bureaucracy and uncertainty, but the first step was taken. He took a deep breath and went back to the living room. The girls were still there, but the cartoon had ended. Now they were playing with their dolls, creating some complex story involving dramatic rescues and magic powers. "Ruby," he called softly. "Can we talk for a minute, just the two of us?" Ruby looked up, surprised. Tessa looked from one to the other, curious. "Is it a secret?" Tessa asked, slightly offended at being excluded. "Not exactly," Spencer replied with a gentle smile. "But I need to talk to Ruby first and then we'll tell you, I promise." Tessa considered for a moment, then shrugged, turning her attention back to the dolls. "Okay, but don't take too long." Ruby followed Spencer to the kitchen, her face a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Since she had arrived, private conversations usually meant some kind of change. The social worker's visit, starting school, new rules or routines. Spencer gestured for her to sit at the table and took a seat beside her, rather than across from her. He wanted this conversation to be as equal as possible, not a declaration of authority. "Ruby," he began, choosing his words carefully, "you've been with us for almost 2 months now. How do you feel living here?" The girl thought for a moment, her fingers playing with the edge of the tablecloth. "Good," she finally answered. "I like it here. Are you happy?" A small smile appeared on her lips. "Yes." Spencer nodded, encouraged by her direct response. "I called Mrs. Patel this morning," he continued. "Do you know what adoption is, Ruby?" Her eyes widened slightly, but she shook her head. "It's when someone becomes a mother or father to a child they didn't give birth to," Spencer explained gently. "The person chooses the child to be part of their family forever. And the child also gets to choose if they want to be part of that family." Ruby listened intently, absolutely still. "Ruby," Spencer looked directly into her eyes, speaking with all the sincerity he could muster. "Do you want to be my daughter? Officially? Do you want me to be your dad, not just temporarily, but forever?" The question hung in the air between them. Ruby looked at Spencer as if trying to read beyond his words, searching for any sign that it wasn't real, that there was some catch or hidden condition. I know I can't replace your mom, he continued, when the silence stretched on. No one ever could. She will always be your mum, and you can always love her and remember her. But if you want, we can be your family now. Tessa already thinks of you as a sister, and I—" His voice faltered slightly. "I would love to be your dad." Ruby remained silent, her eyes fixed on him, but Spencer could see the emotions passing over her face like clouds in a summer sky. Surprise, disbelief, fear, hope. "You don't have to answer now," he assured her. "It's a big decision. You can think about it." "Yes," Ruby interrupted, her voice almost a whisper. "Yes. I want to," she confirmed, a little louder. "I want to be your daughter." Something broke inside Spencer, a final barrier he didn't even know was there. He held out his arms, and Ruby launched herself into them, burying her face in his chest. "I'm going to call Child Protective Services today," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're going to start the adoption process." Ruby took a moment to react to the words. She was completely still in Spencer's arms, as if afraid any movement might undo the moment. Then, slowly, her body began to tremble. They weren't audible sobs, but silent tears that soaked Spencer's shirt. Just then, Tessa appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the prolonged silence. "What happened?" she asked, alarmed at the sight of the tears. "Why is Ruby crying?" Spencer extended an arm, inviting her to join the hug. "Ruby is going to stay with us forever," he explained. "And we're going to adopt her. She's going to be your sister, officially." Tessa's eyes lit up. "Really? Forever and ever?" Spencer nodded, and Tessa rushed to them, throwing her arms around Ruby, hugging her with all the strength her little arms could manage. "I knew it," she exclaimed, practically jumping with joy. "I knew you were going to stay. Now we're real sisters." Ruby finally lifted her face, tears still streaming down her cheeks, but now accompanied by a shy smile. Spencer closed his eyes, holding both girls against his chest. He felt something happening inside him, a subtle but profound transformation. The pain of losing Hannah, so sharp and persistent for so long, hadn't completely vanished. It never would. But it was changing into something new, a renewed ability to love, to build, to look toward the future instead of being trapped in the past. It wasn't replacement, but transformation, pain turning into purpose, loss making way for a new kind of love. In the girls' laughter, one exuberant, the other still hesitant but real, Spencer found the certainty that they were all together, building something new from the fragments of what had been lost. A family. The next morning dawned with a surprisingly blue sky, as if the universe itself wanted to celebrate the family's decision. The snow that had fallen during the night glistened under the winter sun, turning the outside world into a fairy tale scene. Spencer woke up early, his head full of plans and forms to fill out, phone calls to make, procedures to follow. The adoption process would be long, Mrs. Patel had made that clear, but he was determined not to waste time. But today would not be a day for bureaucracy. Today would be a day for celebration. He went downstairs and found the girls already in the kitchen, still in their pajamas, trying to make breakfast. Tessa was standing on a stool, reaching for the cereal in the cupboard, while Ruby placed bowls on the table with meticulous care. Good morning," Spencer greeted, hiding a smile at the scene. "I see we have some early bird chefs today." "We were making a surprise for you," Tessa explained, balancing the cereal box. But you woke up too early." Spencer noticed they had set the table with great care, folded napkins, though a bit crooked, aligned silverware, and even a small artificial flower placed in a glass as a centerpiece. "It's our first breakfast as an official family," Ruby said, her voice low but firm. Spencer felt his heart clench at the simplicity of that statement. For Ruby, even before any papers were signed, yesterday's decision had already sealed the deal. They were a family now. Official. As they ate, Spencer announced his plans. "I was thinking we should celebrate today. How about a day at the park? The sun is shining, the snow looks perfect for a snowman, and then we can have lunch out." The girls' eyes lit up. Outing days were rare during the week, but Spencer had decided to take the day off. Some moments were too important to be postponed. An hour later, they were all ready, bundled up, gloved, and eager for the adventure. The park was just a few blocks away, and they decided to walk, enjoying the clear day. Spencer walked in the middle, a girl on each side, holding their hands. Every now and then, he would lift Ruby and Tessa simultaneously, making them fly for a moment, drawing squeals of joy. The park was covered in a pristine layer of snow, with very few footprints marking the white surface. The trees, their bare branches coated in ice, looked like crystal sculptures. The girls ran towards the playground, with Spencer following close behind. Ruby got on a swing with an expression of pure delight. Unlike Tessa, who had been coming to the park since she was a baby, this was a relatively new experience for her. "Push me really high," she requested, holding the chains with determination. Spencer stood behind the swing and began to push her, carefully at first, then with more force when he realized she wasn't afraid. Ruby went higher and higher, laughing with abandon, her hat nearly falling off with the motion. "Look how high I'm flying," she shouted. "I'm almost touching the sky." Tessa, not wanting to be left behind, took the swing next to her and began to pump her legs, a skill she had recently mastered. Spencer alternated between pushing one and the other, marveling at the simple joy a swing could provide. He watched Ruby's face especially, the way she closed her eyes at the highest points, as if savoring the feeling of freedom, of being suspended in the air for a brief moment. "Look, Daddy!" Ruby called, hanging upside down from a horizontal bar. It was the first time she had called him Daddy, spontaneously, without hesitation. The word came out so naturally that Ruby didn't even seem to notice, but Spencer felt as if someone had squeezed his heart. After the swings came the slides, the climbing bars, the merry-go-rounds. The girls explored each piece of equipment with renewed enthusiasm, calling Spencer to see their feats, competing playfully, encouraging each other. Finally, tired of the playground, the girls decided to build a snowman. Spencer helped roll the large balls that would form the base and body, while Tessa and Ruby took care of the details: small twigs for arms, stones for eyes, a carrot for a nose. The morning passed quickly, with runs in the snow, snowball fights, and even snow angels, where the girls lay on their backs and moved their arms to create wings on the white surface. When the sun reached its highest point, the girls' cheeks were flushed from the cold and activity. Their eyes shone with excitement, and their stomachs were beginning to protest with hunger. "Time for lunch," Spencer announced, shaking the snow off their clothes. "Did I know a great diner near here?" The Silver Star Diner was a traditional neighborhood spot, with red leather booths, black and white checkered floors, and an old jukebox in the corner. The place had a 1950s vibe, with photos of Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley on the walls. Spencer chose a booth near the window, and the girls sat side by side, still excited from the morning in the park. A waitress with a Doris name tag approached, smiling when she saw the children. "What'll it be today, detectives?" she asked, using the nickname she had given Spencer and Tessa during their regular visits before Hannah's death. "Sir Doris, this is Ruby," Spencer introduced. "She's part of our family now." The waitress looked at Ruby with a warm smile. "Welcome, rookie detective. It's a pleasure to meet you." Ruby smiled shyly, clearly charmed by the reception. They ordered hamburgers, French fries, and for dessert, milkshakes, chocolate for Tessa, strawberry for Ruby. When the drinks arrived, in tall glasses topped with whipped cream and a cherry, Ruby's eyes widened. She watched Tessa take her straw and start sipping the frozen drink, then imitated the gesture carefully. At the first sip, her eyes closed with the pleasure of discovery, and a small murmur escaped her lips. "Like it?" Spencer asked, amused by her reaction. Ruby opened her eyes, a whipped cream mustache forming above her upper lip. "I didn't know something this good existed," she said, laughing with genuine delight. "It's like cold, but it doesn't hurt your teeth, and sweet, but not too sweet. It's perfect." Spencer watched, moved, as she savored every sip as if it were a precious experience. For many children, a milkshake was a common, perhaps even mundane thing. For Ruby, it was a wonderful discovery, a small miracle in a glass. At that moment, sitting in an ordinary diner on an ordinary winter day, Spencer was struck by the realization of how much his life had changed in just 2 months. That girl, now his daughter, had appeared at Christmas like an unexpected gift. Ruby had been the greatest Christmas gift he had ever received, a gift he didn't know he needed, but which had somehow filled a void that pain had created, not replacing what was lost, but adding something new, something equally precious. The following days were filled with preparations. Mrs. Patel visited again, bringing piles of documents for Spencer to fill out. The process would be long, possibly months, but she seemed optimistic about the final outcome. One of the first steps was to officially enroll Ruby in the same school as Tessa. Until then, she had been attending as a temporary student, but now Spencer filled out all the forms, listing himself as the legal guardian. The night before Ruby's official first day, Tessa had a special idea. "Can we wear matching bows tomorrow?" she asked, as Spencer braided her hair before bed. "So everyone knows we're sisters." The idea was met with enthusiasm by Ruby, who had never had many hair accessories before. Spencer found identical blue ribbons and practiced making perfect bows, determined not to disappoint the girls on their big day. The morning of the official first day, as the girls called it, was marked by a mix of excitement and nervousness. Ruby, although she already knew the school, seemed anxious about her new status. She would no longer be half the girls staying with the Lawsons. But Ruby Lawson, even though the adoption process and legal name change were still underway, Spencer made a special breakfast, heart-shaped pancakes, and made sure they were both impeccably dressed, with the blue bows perfectly tied in their hair. "You look beautiful," he declared, looking at his daughters with unrestrained pride. The prettiest girls in the school, no doubt. The walk to school was filled with lively conversation. Tessa explained to Ruby where everything was, who the nice teachers were, what the best places to play during recess were, information Ruby already knew, but that Tessa felt the need to repeat on this special day. As they approached the school gate, Spencer noticed that Ruby was holding Tessa's hand tightly, as if she needed that support to take the final steps. Tessa, in turn, took on the role of the older sister, though they were the same age, guiding Ruby with confidence. Before they went in, Spencer called out, "Girls, wait a moment." They turned, curious. Spencer took his phone out of his pocket. "I want to capture this moment. Ruby's official first day of school. Can you stand over there in front of the gate?" The girls obeyed, standing side by side, hand in hand, the identical blue bows swaying slightly in the morning breeze. Tessa put her arm around Ruby's shoulders in a protective gesture, and they both smiled, Tessa broadly, Ruby with more restraint, but just as genuine. Spencer took the picture, capturing that moment of pure connection between the two. Then a passing mother offered to take a picture of the three of them together. "Thank you," Spencer accepted, handing over his phone and positioning himself between the girls, an arm around each of them. "Say family," the woman requested, holding the phone. "Family," they exclaimed in unison, their smiles lighting up the cold morning. The camera's click captured the moment. Spencer in the center, Tessa on his right, Ruby on his left, all united not just by intertwined arms, but by something deeper, more permanent. The image of the three of them together, with the school building in the background and the blue sky above, marked more than a first day of school. It marked the official birth of a new family. After the girls went inside, waving one last time before disappearing into the building, Spencer stood for a moment, looking at the photo on his phone. There they were, not perfect, not without scars, not without painful memories, but together, whole in a new way. Life, Spencer realized, doesn't follow a straight line. It has unexpected curves, dead ends, seemingly insurmountable mountains. There are losses that seem impossible to bear, pains that threaten to swallow everything. But there are also improbable encounters, connections forged at the exact moment they are needed most, new beginnings disguised as endings. His story with Hannah hadn't ended. It would always continue within him, within Tessa, in the memories they kept alive, in the love that would never disappear. But now a new chapter was beginning, with new characters, new adventures, new possibilities. Spencer put the phone in his pocket and walked back home, feeling the winter sun on his face. The road ahead would be long, with paperwork, hearings, maybe even unexpected obstacles. But for the first time in a long time, he felt truly hopeful. It wasn't the future he had imagined. It wasn't the plan he had made. It was better because it was real, it was now, and it was theirs. A family born not of blood or obligation, but of choice, of love, and of an unexpected encounter on Christmas morning. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.